Hello and welcome to another episode of Death by Bunjie. This is another video where I'm looking at yet another crossbow brand, another model of crossbow. Looking for a successor to Bunjie, and what crossbow is going to accompany me into the woods for the 2021 crossbow seasons. That's the purpose of this video. When I first Googled Killer Instinct, I end up with some video game. Picture after picture of this video game. And that is not what we're looking for here. So there might be crossbows in that, but that's not what we're looking for. Instead, we're looking for, and if I could spell crossbow correctly, my phone would probably appreciate that. We come up with all kinds of great options here, and we're going to go to killercrossbows.com. These are for killers right here. And we'll click on that and see what we got. Right off the bat, we see our current processing time for orders is 24 to 78 hours. Please allow 5 to 7 days for delivery. Now, COVID and all that good stuff, I talked about that in a recent video. I think it was Raven. Almost nothing on their website was in stock. I recognize you can go to a dealer. You can go to Cabela's or Bass Pro Shops, buy them online from other places. You can buy them at local shops. But the interesting thing was that the store, the supply of these things that Raven had on hand was diminishing, probably due to COVID. These folks, on the other hand, appear to have much faster processing times. They can guarantee delivery of things and say, look, if you give us 5 to 7 days, we'll get it to you. That's pretty cool. The SWAT X1, that one has the word new next to it, which tells me that is a new offering from Killer Instinct Crossbows. If we scroll down a little bit, that appears to be the same crossbow, but different view angles and different pictures and different diagrams, and we are talking about that. And we go down here, they got gear, they can sell you a hat if they want, and they have a limited consumer lifetime warranty. Very interesting. Something I haven't talked about is warranties on these videos. I mentioned that in the other one that I didn't really talk about that stuff. A lot of these crossbow manufacturers now have some kind of lifetime warranty associated with their crossbows. That's more and more common now. And that is something I'll discuss in future videos. I think that's a relevant discussion. So here what we've got is we have a stirrup that is pointing down. That's interesting, an interesting design. You put your foot against that apparently, but it also makes for a nice little stand, because if we look, the butt of that crossbow, and we'll click on this one. We're just going to go to that. The SWAT X1, that's the one we're going to look at for the purposes of this one. 405 feet per second. But it makes for a nice little stand the way it is designed here, because if we look at this, we have the stirrup here out front supporting the crossbow. And then in the back, we have the stock, right, the butt on the ground also. And that's pretty interesting. That's an interesting design. That also could be useful if you are in a ground hunting situation where you're laying down and you want to shoot like off a stone wall, off a little rise. You're sitting there sort of hidden in the ground in a depression or something, and you've got the stirrup to support it, almost like a built-in tripod. Kind of neat. I do like the way, and you guys are sound like a broken record on some of these things, but that looks to me very interesting here. The arrow, the field point in this case, but a broadhead, if it were affixed to the end of that arrow, would be protected somewhat by that crossbow, by the end of that. So you have not only these little feet here on the end to support and protect that crossbow on the end, but also the arrow is tucked back far enough that I don't think you're going to have a problem with getting that broadhead snagged on things, or if you go to set it down in a blind or something like that, you won't have a problem. I like that. I like that design. This is a lot of thoughts gone into that, and they've designed it very well. One thing I want to point out about this, and it was brought to my attention, was look at the front of this crossbow, the way the arrow, not just the broadhead and the field point are protected, no, but also the way the arrow is protected. It is contained within a barrel on this crossbow. This is the model. It's all coming back to me now. When I had gone to look at this before, I was doing it in response to a friend of Bunjie who sent me an email. Take a look at that crossbow and take a look at the barrel. And I wasn't really sure what he's talking about. I mean, I understand crossbows have barrels at the fore end of the crossbow, right? The shooting rail is affixed above the barrel, that sort of thing. But this actually has a tube, like a barrel, where the arrow is inserted in it, and it is actually protected 360 degrees. That's kind of nice. You don't have the floppiness associated with carrying it and everything else. It's not going to get caught on things. Time would tell whether dirt and grime and hemlock needles or pine needles, what have you, debris, is that going to get in there and clog up that tube, create problems for you down the road? Maybe you got to blow that out with an air compressor or something like that. I don't know. But that's an interesting approach just the same. So here's another view of this crossbow. I do like the style of this crossbow. This is, I think, if we look at the evolution of crossbows and their designs, this is a very modern design of crossbow. I really do like this more modern design. When you're looking at crossbows, this strikes me as a more modern design. You've got the limbs sort of taking that almost Raven-esque shape a little bit. That's something that came out with them and their development, but you're seeing them getting narrower and narrower and narrower. Those limbs are now starting to come back toward you, reaching the scope in this instance. They're halfway down the length of the crossbow instead of being out in front of you, making the crossbow wider. That's a modern design, and it's a very interesting modern design. I like it a lot. I do like the pistol style grips. That's an AR style grip almost, or something akin to that, that looks like it would be comfortable shooting up front. One of the things when I talk about the grips and the rifle stocks and all that, I had commented on how, how your hands might feel more comfortable in some situations than others. I do like that style grip, I really do. Looking back here, we have our cheek piece and the safe and fire. Now this is interesting. This is clear back by the butt of the crossbow. The safety is located right there. So if I'm right-handed and holding this crossbow, my cheek is here. Here's the stock of the crossbow, and my safety is right here by my ear on the other side of the stock. I'm not sure if that'd be comfortable or not. Before you shoulder it, do you work the safety and then shoulder it? Is that what we're thinking here? I'd have to get into a slightly different routine thinking about that. Safety location is something I have not spent enough time talking about on these videos. Now, a few years ago when I was looking at these crossbows, more and more manufacturers were going to a sliding safety on the side of the crossbow, and they were putting these little, just a little bump that would stick out for a switch. I don't like that at all. I like this style where you've got that big knob sticking out, and that thing, I'm going to know if I push that forward or back, okay? I'm going to know if I'm sliding that switch. Something delicate that you have to find and slide on the side of a crossbow in the heat of the moment when the animal is in your presence. No, thank you. I'm not interested in that. That is something that I will look at very closely, working those safeties when I try these crossbows out in person, and I would suggest anybody should want to do that, right? More and more what I'm seeing, at least on these websites and these pictures, the safeties are of a design that I can live with. I think that is going to be very workable for me. Now, the location on this one seems a little odd to have it up here. Many times when I am hunting with Bunjie, I'm out there and that's got a traditional hammer style safety, right? Very similar to what was on my Model 94 Winchester when I was growing up as a rifle hunter. And you're working that safety back and forth this way with your thumb. The crossbow, Bunjie has that same setup where you can move it up and down with your thumb. It's on the back of the stock, right above right where your thumb goes, where you're holding on to it. It's right where your thumb is. So I don't have to go fishing around looking on the side. Some of the newer Excaliburs, you got to look on the side, whatever, something like that, in order to work the safety. That may or may not be acceptable. That may or may not work for me or for you going forward. I have to get those in person and see them. This one puts it back here. Now, normally what I would be doing when I'm hunting is I would hold that crossbow up, be looking through the scope, and then when I'm ready to take a shot, I ease that safety up, and I've gotten in the habit of easing it up instead of flicking it up with my thumb because deer will hear that safety turn off. I ease it up, ready to take a shot. Here I would have to adjust it before I lift it up and shoulder the crossbow. Not sure I like that. Have to play around with it. Another thing about safeties, when I use these in person, and there's no way to tell based on this review, these videos are not going to answer this question for me or for you. But I do not want a safety that clicks when I turn it on or off. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want an audible click. Some of them are designed in the past, I don't know if they're still doing this, but some manufacturers were designing safeties so that there was no way that you could ease that safety without a click. And that click, deer are gonna hear that click. I have witnessed it firsthand more than once, where the safety goes off and a deer looks. If you watch a lot of Death by Bunjie videos, that's been in there. So very interesting. Okay, so we've got that for a design there, and here we have another view of it. If we look at the back end of this, you can see a couple of things. Number one, you can see that little red button there on the top. That little guy sticking out there, that is to help us, if I remember correctly, to load the arrows. Essentially, this crossbow, you're going to slide that arrow down through the barrel, okay, after you've cocked the crossbow. You slide that in there, and now your hands are out of the way of the arrow, okay? They are out of the way of the string, out of the way of the arrow. But then, once that's in there, to seat it, you pull that switch back, that little red switch, and that backs the arrow back in and knocks it properly, so that you know that you have a clean and consistent knocking of the arrow each time. When I saw that demonstrated in a video, I thought it was a very interesting design. I thought that was very good. I don't know about the optics on Killer Instinct. They have their own scope here. Please tell me in the comments about the optics. Do you like the scopes? Have you hunted with them? Are they adequate? Are they super good? Whatever, what have you. But here again, we see how narrow this crossbow is. We also see that it has quieting gear attached to it. If we click on there, those rubber fingers right there are designed to absorb vibration and make the crossbow a little bit quieter. So that should be interesting as well. Those will reduce the speed that you get out of your crossbow, but I find it a little bit interesting on these designs versus Bunjie, versus the Excalibur designs, or any of the previous designs of crossbows where the limbs are outstretched in front of you in more of a cross fashion, right? The crossbow. When those limbs are right out in front of you and you put rubber grommets, all that rubber stuff on there, that's extra weight you're adding to those limbs. It's going to reduce the speed of those limbs as they travel, and that will slow down your crossbow. I saw that, did videos of it. I've experimented with lots of that stuff, you know, blah, 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 right? Those things are very important to the speed of your crossbow, and I think, my theory is, more so on crossbows of that traditional design where the limbs are out in front of you. If you have these more modern designs where we have limbs that are this narrow, designed in this fashion, I don't think there's as much limb travel on this. There simply is not as much limb travel on these crossbows as there would be on that more traditional style. And for that reason, I suspect that when they add that rubber to these styles of limbs, I don't think that it has as much to do with slowing down the crossbow. I doubt it has the same effect because these limbs aren't traveling nearly as much, and therefore they aren't trying to move the weight of that rubber nearly as far. I suspect that makes a difference. There's more going on with these crossbows in the cams to increase speed. There's more going on with these crossbows to increase the draw length to increase speed, and less going on with limb travel. Does that make sense? And that's kind of where my theory goes with this stuff. That's why I'm thinking that. But that brings up another very interesting point. And that is that on this crossbow, look how steep the angle of the strings is. The angle of that string as it leaves the cams and comes back in a cocked position. This appears to be the cocked position of this crossbow. That string comes back almost parallel to the rail, almost parallel to the barrel. That's how narrow we have gotten. We have limbs that are this narrow where the string is coming straight back. It was pointed out to me, and I think this is a very good point. A couple of friends of Bunjie sent me a message and they were saying, look, this is a problem for string wear potentially. Because if you look at Bunjie, for example, with 36-inch wide limbs, and you cock it and now it's 34 inches wide or 32 inches wide or something like that, those strings are going to come back at an angle like this, right? And so here's your trigger mechanism holding that string here. And when you cock it, the feet on the little pulleys there, right, the little fingers on your cocking aid, you're going to draw that string back, and it's just sort of rounded around that. But when you get a real steep angle with more narrow limbs that's coming back, your cocking mechanism is going to start to wear on your string more so. And now you've got the string wrapped around the trigger mechanism in a cocked position where it's like this instead of this. More wear on that serving. It's bending that serving more and putting more stress on the serving. So it might reduce your serving wear. I don't have any evidence to support that, but it was a good idea, a good thought that was expressed to me. And so I'm expressing it to you so you can go out there and comment on this and let me know if you've used these crossbows or similar crossbows. Have you had that kind of problem? This picture really, really demonstrates what we're talking about here. For them, they're putting this picture up there to show us the difference between this style of crossbow and the more traditional crossbows. Look at the difference in the angle of the string, however. This picture really demonstrates that this probably does create some wear and tear on servings, and I'm anxious to hear about that. When you get into this style of crossbows, it's a different story about changing strings now, isn't it? Some of these crossbows, some of these compound crossbows in this day and age do allow for a string change, even in the field, okay? That's not something that is now exclusively something that recurve crossbows can provide. We can actually do that with compound crossbows now, some of the models. Whether this is one of those, I would have to research it. But we also see here how nicely this broadhead, I think that is a broadhead on the front of this, looks to be is that a G5, one of those G5s? But anyway, that's a broadhead I don't use, but it looks very similar in terms of its size, so I'm confident that this crossbow with a proper arrow will protect my broadhead nicely on my little spot and stalks when I head out there into the woods, into the brush to spot and stalk a big buck. We have our cams. Yep, it comes with cams. That's nice to hear. Or the AccuTac barrel. Now that's the barrel that was mentioned to me that I tried to describe here. You can see where the vanes, where the fletchings are inserted to slide the arrow down the barrel to load that crossbow once it is in a cocked position. It is a 360-degree provision for protection of this crossbow. We do see it looks like it's got a Picatinny rail on the front end of that barrel too. Interesting, and that is with the scope installed back there. So that's kind of neat. The little feet on the front of this thing, I really like that style because that tells me that even without a stirrup sticking out in front, I can set this crossbow down and it will be protected. There's something protecting the limbs, very important to me. 0 creep trigger at 3 pounds of pull. That is something we're reading more and more about. Until I shoot these things, you really won't know whether you like the trigger now, will you? That is just like the safety. That is something I've got to, and then the feel of it, those things, until I can actually hold one of these, you won't know for sure. Now this one comes with a compact crank, or that is available, ultra quick, silent, attaches and detaches in seconds to safely and silently cock the SWAT X1. What we see here, and I remember that from the video, see how the cheek piece has folded up so that we can cock the crossbow. We fold that up out of the way. And here you can kind of see what I was talking about here and what the concern of other Friends of Bunjie and I was. That if you look at the way those hooks are on the string, and apparently this uses a hook-style cranking device, very similar to the Excaliburs, as opposed to a sled style that we'll see, that we saw in our, I think the Ravens use, and we'll see this in other videos. But those hooks come down in there, and that, with that very tight string angle, those hooks being in there, you are increasing the amount of bending that is going on with that serving. And you actually see there the threads separating in the picture, like they are stretched out. On the front of that serving, right here in the middle of the screen, you see the strings are the threads are very close together, but over here we can see them getting them stretched right out. I can tell you, especially on high draw weight bows, that becomes more of a concern. With Bunjie Junior, there has been, since I put a brand new string on it last summer, the green string shows through in parts of that serving, where the serving has stretched out, and it's largely due to all the stress and pressure and weight that is on those hooks as they are pulling that string back, as that string is bending around those hooks. That is a 25-inch wide crossbow, not 36 like Bunjie, but it's 25 inches wide, much wider than this. This is 3 or 4 inches or something like that, right? The string angle, okay, at its widest point, cocked, is going to be like 3 or 4 inches on this thing. But on that crossbow on Bunjie Junior, which happens to be leaning up against the wall right there, but on Bunjie Junior, that's a much wider, much less of a steep string angle, but you still have that kind of an issue on it. So that's a big deal. To me, that's something that we need to be at least considering and thinking about, especially maybe paying close attention to when I step into a shop and try out these crossbows. All right, the scope, the Lumix 1.5 to 5 by 32 IRE speed ring scope. Sounds like it's got all the nuts and bolts I need. Let me know if their optics are any good. Now here's our reticles. Interesting. Now this is a different design. What are they saying about this? Designed to quickly locate your target's vital area. I don't really need the target's vital area drawn on my scope, but I just want to know where to aim. The ballistic semicircle offers improved shooting visibility and greater contrast in low light conditions. While I like the low light stuff, I need all the help I can get with my 50-year-old eyeballs. I can tell you that much. So that's your scope, that's your design. We do not have a 10-yard reticle. We have a 20-yard reticle and 30, 40, blah, blah, blah. So that, and it doesn't have numbers next to it. That's interesting. It doesn't tell us what those numbers are. It really does not. Is that the actual reticles? It does not tell us what those yardages are. 10, that would be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and then a line for 90 and beyond, I guess. I'm not sure I like that scope, but comment on that and tell me what you think about that. Am I right on that, or is that just there for the picture? Sometimes the pictures are not what you're actually getting on these scopes. I have noticed that. So here's some of your accessories you can get. We got a 3-arrow quiver. I don't know why we went from 4-arrow quivers to 3-arrow quivers. I suspect it has something to do with crossbows getting so small. We're using words like micro to describe crossbows now, not just Excalibur with the micro series, but here we're talking about micro this, micro that. But as crossbows have gotten smaller, we now have to make quivers smaller as well, because all of a sudden now the quiver is becoming the big part of the crossbow. That's what I'm seeing with this. What's up with this? How come the arrows are in there backwards? They must have really sharp nocks. I guess. I don't know. If that's the way you like to do it, that's the way you like to do it. All right, so very cool. Let's see if, I think we've been through all of the pictures. $1,300 for the SWAT X1. Well, depending on the specs, that is still an interesting crossbow. I see a lot of things here, assuming it tests nice and it feels good in the hand and it has all the features that we're looking for. It is a very nice looking crossbow and very attractive to me. You can pre-order it now. Maybe it's not even available yet, but at least they have given us a price of $1,300 for this crossbow. What are we looking at here? Spec wise, 405 feet per second, kinetic energy, 142 foot-pounds. We can do the arrow momentum calculator to decide on actual numbers, but the width cocked is 6.25 inches and the width uncocked is 9.75 inches. I cannot believe that I'm looking at crossbows that are 9.75 inches wide. I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining, mind you, but we kind of lose the cross in crossbows. You know what I'm saying? Now we're just getting into this design, everything right out in front of you. Wow, that's amazing. The length, 24.75 inches without riser pads. Without riser pads. Is there anything... It's kind of an odd statement to make, without riser pads. Like, those things don't add an inch. So is it 25 inches with the riser pads? This crossbow does not suffer for being too long. They don't need to be measuring it without the riser pads. I don't necessarily need one shorter. I need one more comfortable. If the balance is there on a shorter crossbow, great, but it doesn't have to be 25 inches long. This crossbow is not as long as Genevieve's Micro Series Excalibur is wide. Think about that. If the goal was to make small crossbows, we are now at the point where we're making small crossbows. Wow. 7.2 pounds, doesn't bother me one bit. I can carry a 10-pound crossbow. I've been carrying a 9-pound plus crossbow for a long time. Not a big deal. Power stroke, 13.25 inches. The draw weight, 195 B. Interesting. It's 195 Bs. That's a lot of Bs. I think that's a typo. When you look right above it, 7.2 LBs, and now we have 195 dash Bs. I think that's a typo, but that does not speak well for the website design. This is such a good website until I found that typo. I really was loving this website. Everything's right where you want to find stuff. It still is a good website, still an attractive crossbow. I won't hold the typo against them, but I can assume that we're at 195 pounds, right? That's our draw weight. And that's in the ballpark of what we're doing. That is in the ballpark of what being able to be rope cocked. And as we saw, they sold us a rope cocker back here. Yeah, there's our quick draw rope cocker. There you go. And now it's got some nice stylish handles. Look at that. I really like that. That's a pretty good looking guy. And if it does come with a crank, I would love to be able to uncock it also. I don't know that that is possible with these. I am interested in this crossbow, although I have lost the part of this webpage where it was telling me all the specs. Strings and cables. You can buy your own strings and cables. I don't know. I think you might need a bow press in order to change those strings and cables. Our 22-inch SWAT XP bolts. We'll look at those. These are a mean looking arrow. I do like that. The castle style vanes, that's pretty cool. One thing that is disappointing to me about these sites is the lack of information that they give you about their arrows. We're fortunate enough here to know that these are 22 inches long, but typically they're not telling me the diameters, they're not telling me the straightness sometimes, they're not telling me all the information that I want so that I can run proper numbers on the next part of our video. 0.346 diameter, very common size, 400 grain total weight. That's with your broadhead, I'm assuming, because it's a 22-inch arrow, probably 300 grains plus 100 grain broadhead for a total of 400 grains. That's right in the ballpark of what we would be expecting from a crossbow in this modern era. I like that. We've kind of seen some of the manufacturers tinkering a little bit with the size of their arrows, the diameters of their arrows. It's kind of refreshing to see one that's got numbers that look familiar to me, the 0.346. So we got the total with a 100 grain field point at 400 grains. And they are telling me with these arrows, I'm hoping that they are an honest company that is telling me that with those arrows, 400 grains, we are hitting 405 feet per second because it says 405 feet per second on here. Well, that's a good looking crossbow. Well, I can tell you, based on what I am seeing here, I am 100% interested in Killer Instinct crossbows, and I am happy that they have put together such a nice website, except for that one typo. But other than that, it is a very good website and a very interesting series of crossbows. So what we're going to do, we're going to X out of here, and we're going to click on here, and we're going to back up, and we're going to go to, there's a site that I want to check out, and you guys are like, oh, I wonder what site he's going to check out. It's a mystery. No, it's not. It's the Realtree Arrow Momentum Calculator. We're going to go on there again. I love this little site. It's so much fun. It's so simple. That's what I like about it. It's simple. It gives me the information I want. It's a fun little way to end these videos. And it gives me the information I want, not just the information, but it gives it to me in a way that's fun. But we're going to type in our numbers here. We're going to see how we make out. We have an arrow, that's a 400 grain arrow, but we're going to jack this up a little bit to 450 grains. And the reason I'm doing that, as I've mentioned in other videos, I intend at this time at least to hunt with a 150 grain broadhead, the Rage Trifan, primarily because that's the broadhead that Genevieve chose, and I'm going to keep hunting with the broadhead that she chose because I have boxes and boxes of them that I got her for Christmas. So more than she'll go through in the next several seasons. So she's going to need a little help digging into that box of broadheads, right? So the arrow speed, though, now we would be at 405 feet per second if we used a 100 grain broadhead. We're going to lose a little bit of speed, probably up to 15 feet per second by my calculations, if we up that broadhead weight by 50 grains. So we're probably going to be around 390 with this crossbow, give or take. So we'll just type that in there and it's going to give us an idea about what we're doing. We're still really close to 400 feet per second, which is where I want to be. If I can be around 400 feet per second, I'm going to be very happy. I don't need to enter to win. We'll get rid of that. Okay. And so we got those numbers, the 450 and the 390, and kaboom, it mooses. Look at that. This, my friends, is a crossbow that mooses out of the box. 151.95 foot-pounds of kinetic energy and 0.779 slugs. That's a lot. That's awesome. I love it, and it will do it with style. And it will do it out of the box. That's what I really, really like about it. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time tinkering with arrows. I got Netflix to watch, right? Actually, I've got videos to make, a website to maintain, deathbybungie.com. Check it out. My gear page on there. You can look on there and see all the different types of gear that I use and little write-ups about them. And also, I'm writing another book. But if you want to check out my first book, the Death by Bungie Crossbow Story, Confessions of a Crossbow Hunter, you can check that out on Amazon.com or on deathbybungie.com. Let me know in the comments or your thoughts on this crossbow and any answers to the various questions. I came up with more questions looking at this one, I think, than I did answers. But we've got another one that we might have to check out at a local shop, though, don't we? Until next time, all hail Bungie.